Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. In this video you will listen 3 scary stories of mysterious islands. Story 1. Have you ever been to an island that doesn't appear on any map? Well, I have, and I'll never forget what I saw there. I used to work for a small charter company in Maine. We'd ferry tourists to islands for sightseeing, fishing, or just day trips. Most of them were peaceful, beautiful places. But there was one island the locals warned us about. They called it Hollow Rock. It wasn't on official maps anymore. The story was that it used to be a fishing settlement back in the 1940s, but the place was abandoned after a fire. Nobody ever really talked about it, except to say, "Don't go there." One evening in September, I had a couple booked for a private trip, Tom and Allison. They'd heard about Hollow Rock and begged me to take them there. Against my better judgment, I gave in. When we arrived, something felt wrong immediately. The air was heavy, almost electric. The trees bent strangely, as if permanently shaped by strong winds, though the night was calm. The houses stood like dark teeth against the horizon, every window boarded shut. Tom was thrilled, of course. He and Allison wanted photos inside the old buildings. So we split up. Allison toured the church, Tom toured the cliffs. I stayed back with the boat. That's when I saw it. The houses weren't dark at all. Through the cracks in the wood, faint lights flickered like candles. I shouted for them, but they didn't answer. Grabbing my flashlight, I went toward the church. Its front door was open, swaying gently. Inside was freezing cold, yet in the center of the dusty church was a pile of ashes. "Still warm, Allison," I called. Silence. Suddenly, Tom screamed from the cliffs. I ran toward the sound and found him on his knees, staring into the black water. Below, floating near the rocks, was Allison's red jacket. I turned for help, but Tom was gone. In his place, a trail of wet footprints leading back into the woods. I followed them for hours. They ended at one of the houses. When I shined my flashlight through a crack, my blood ran cold. Dozens of figures stood inside, perfectly still, watching me. I bolted for the boat and didn't stop until I reached the mainland. The next morning, I reported them missing. Search parties went to Hollow Rock, but the island was empty. No footprints, no jacket. No figures in the houses, nothing. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a photograph. It showed Tom and Allison smiling in front of the church, and behind them, in the windows, dozens of pale faces staring out. I've never gone back to Hollow Rock, and I don't think I ever will. Story 2. This story was sent to me by someone who used to work in oceanic research. It's one of the most terrifying accounts I've ever read. If it's true, it's proof that there are still places on this planet we should never step foot on. In the summer of 1998, a small research team of 6 people was sent to study unusual coral formations near a cluster of islands in the South Pacific. The team was led by Dr. Charles Winters, a marine biologist. Along with him were his assistant, a young grad student named Claire, 2 field divers, and a pair of hired crewmen who handled the boat and supplies. The island they were headed to was unnamed on official maps, marked only as Site B-17. Satellite images showed jagged rock formations and dense jungle. The goal was simple: spend 5 days documenting coral growth around its reefs. But from the moment they neared the island, things felt wrong. The water grew darker as they approached, a murky green that seemed to swallow the sunlight. The air was unnaturally still, the waves slapping against the boat in a slow, uneven rhythm. And then they saw them, the people, on the cliffs above. Dozens of figures stood motionless, watching as their boat drew closer. Barefoot, thin, their skin pale like they hadn't seen sunlight in years. None of them waved, none of them spoke. They just stared. The crewmen whispered that they should turn back, but Dr. Winters insisted they were likely just locals, and that the island was uninhabited, according to records. He laughed it off, though his voice cracked slightly. They anchored near the beach, and that's when the figures disappeared from the cliffs. The team set up camp just inland, near the tree line. The jungle loomed over them, dense and silent, not even birds called. That night, as they prepared food, they heard footsteps, soft, dragging steps circling their tents. When they shined flashlights, the jungle floor was empty. But in the morning, there were footprints in the sand, dozens of them. Bare, human footprints leading all around their camp. On the second day, while diving near the reefs, one of the divers Mark swore he saw something move between the coral. Something too large to be a fish. When he surfaced, he was pale, shaking. "Something's down there," he muttered, "something watching us." That night, they found their food supplies torn apart. Not stolen, not eaten, just shredded and scattered. And on one of the cooler lids was a single word, carved deep with something sharp: "Leave." That was all he said. Dr. Winters stammered something about being researchers, about leaving soon. But the man simply repeated, louder this time, "Leave or die." Then they turned and disappeared into the jungle. The team debated leaving immediately, but Winters, stubborn and desperate to finish his work, insisted they stay just one more day. It was a mistake that would cost them everything. That night the attack came. It started with screams. One of the crewmen, a man named Victor, staggered out of his tent, clutching his stomach. His shirt was soaked in blood. Behind him, 3 figures emerged from the trees, their faces painted with ash, their teeth filed down into jagged points. They didn't run. They walked slowly, deliberately, as Victor collapsed in the sand. The team scattered, grabbing what little they could. The attackers didn't chase immediately. They seemed to enjoy watching the panic. But when Winters fired a flare into the air, the figures let out a shrill, inhuman scream and charged. Mark the diver was the first to fall. One of them tackled him, biting into his shoulder like an animal. Another pinned his arms, as a third slammed a rock down onto his skull. Claire ran for the boat, but more figures emerged from the jungle, dozens of them. They had been waiting. The boat was surrounded. The survivors, Dr. Winters, Claire, and one crewman named Ellis, were dragged into the jungle. What they saw there was worse than anything they could have imagined. The islanders lived in crude huts made of driftwood and bone. Skulls hung from trees. Fires burned with pots of something inside. The smell was unbearable. They were thrown into a pit, covered with woven nets. From there, they saw the truth. These weren't ordinary people. Their eyes reflected the firelight like animals. Their mouths were stained dark red. Their bodies were covered in strange scars, deliberate carvings. They didn't just want the outsiders gone, they wanted them broken, consumed. One by one, the islanders dragged the captives from the pit. They didn't use blades, they used rocks, teeth, fingernails sharpened to points. Ellis was taken first. His screams echoed for hours. Winters tried to shield Claire's ears, but he was shaking, muttering to himself that this wasn't possible, that these people weren't human anymore. When Winters was taken, Claire watched in horror as he was forced to his knees. The leader of the group leaned close and whispered something into his ear before caving his skull in with a stone. Claire was the last, but something happened that night, something that saved her. A storm rolled in from the sea, violent winds tearing through the trees. The islanders scattered, howling like animals as the rain poured. Claire used the chaos to slip free of the pit. She ran barefoot through the jungle, branches tearing her skin. She didn't stop until she reached the beach. By some miracle, one of the smaller boats had broken loose in the storm, drifting just offshore. She swam for it, climbed in, and didn't look back until the island was a dark shadow on the horizon. When she was finally rescued 2 days later, dehydrated and half mad, she told her story. But no one believed her. Authorities searched the island weeks later. They found nothing, no huts, no bones, no people. Just empty jungle and black sand. It was as if they had never existed. Claire tried to move on, but she never could. She had nightmares every night, hearing the rasping voice whisper, "Leave or die." She swore the leader of the islanders wasn't just a man. His face had been too long, his mouth too wide, his eyes too empty. She believed they weren't human at all, but something older. Something that lived on that island long before maps, long before history. And she believed they would still be there, waiting, watching for the next boat to come too close. Claire is still alive today. She's never returned to the ocean, never even boarded another boat. She says the world still doesn't understand how many places remain hidden out there, and how many things we were never meant to find. Story 3. This story was sent to me by a woman who asked me not to use her real name. She was a solo traveler, and what happened to her on an island off the coast of Thailand is one of the scariest experiences I've ever been told. To this day, she refuses to travel alone again. The woman, let's call her Emily, was 25 when this happened. She had been traveling through Southeast Asia for a few months, staying in hostels, meeting other travelers, and taking boat tour to nearby islands. On one particular day, while staying in Phuket, she heard about an island that wasn't on the maps. Supposedly, it was a hidden gem, with untouched beaches and zero tourists. A fisherman at the dock told her he could take her there for a small fee. Emily was adventurous, maybe too adventurous, against her better judgment. She agreed. The fisherman's boat was old and creaky, but he seemed friendly enough. The ride took about an hour, and when they approached the island, Emily's excitement grew. The water was crystal clear, and the sand was blindingly white. But something felt off. There were no sounds. No birds, no crabs, not even the distant hum of insects. Just silence. The fisherman refused to set foot on the island. He dropped Emily off near the shore and said he'd be back for her at sunset. She laughed it off, thinking he was just superstitious. Emily wandered inland, filming on her camera, talking to herself like a travel vlogger. The jungle was dense, and the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. She found strange wooden structures tied between trees. At first, she thought they were old fishing traps or some kind of art, but when she looked closer, she realized they were dolls. Handmade dolls, tied together with rope and bones. Some hung upside down, some had shells for eyes, and some were nailed into the trees with crude spikes. Emily laughed nervously, telling the camera, "Well, this is creepy," but deep down, her stomach dropped. As she moved deeper inland, she saw something else: footprints. Not fresh, but not old either, dozens of them, barefoot, pressed deep into the mud. And then she heard it, a laugh. High-pitched, echoing through the trees. She froze. It didn't sound close, but it didn't sound far either. Emily turned back toward the beach, deciding she'd had enough exploring. But as she walked, she noticed something that made her heart stop. Her own footprints, the ones she had made coming inland, were gone. The sand was smooth, as if someone had brushed them away. She ran. When she reached the beach, the boat was gone. The fisherman hadn't just left. There were no signs he'd ever been there. The tide was low, the water calm, but the shore was empty. Emily screamed his name, but the only reply was the sound of waves. And then she noticed something at the edge of the trees. A figure, standing completely still, watching her. Its skin was grayish, stretched tight over its bones. Its head tilted unnaturally far to one side. Like a broken doll, Emily backed away slowly. She didn't want to believe what she was seeing, but when she blinked, the figure was suddenly closer, at least 10 feet closer. She turned and ran along the beach, her heart pounding. By the time the sun set, Emily was still alone. She had hidden herself beneath a rock ledge on the far side of the island. She tried not to cry, but every sound in the darkness made her flinch. The worst part was the laughing. It came and went throughout the night, sometimes distant, sometimes right outside her hiding spot. At one point, she swore she heard whispering, words she couldn't understand. And then, the sound of feet dragging across the sand. She stayed awake all night, clutching a broken piece of driftwood like a weapon. When morning came, she forced herself to move. She walked along the cliffs, looking for any sign of escape. That's when she found it. A cave. Inside were piles of bones. Some animal, some definitely human, skulls stacked neatly, jawbones hanging from strings like wind chimes, and carved into the rock, over and over, was a single word in English: stay. Emily ran back to the beach. She didn't care if she had to swim for miles, she just needed to get off the island. But when she reached the shore, she saw something that made her fall to her knees. The fisherman's boat was back, only it was empty. Blood covered the inside. Thick, dark stains. The engine had been ripped apart, wires dangling into the water, and tied to the mast was a doll, one made out of Emily's backpack, her clothes, and her own hair braided into its chest. She didn't remember screaming, but she must have. Because when she opened her eyes again, the grey figure was standing only a few feet away. Its mouth was open, but no sound came out. And then, more figures appeared, dozens of them, crawling out of the jungle, surrounding her on the beach. Emily doesn't remember what happened next. She claims she blacked out. She woke up 3 days later, floating on a piece of driftwood in open water. A passing cargo ship rescued her. She had no injuries, no signs of assault. But her hair had been cut unevenly, chunks missing. When she told her story, no one believed her. Authorities searched the coordinates she gave, but they found nothing, no island at all. Just endless ocean. Emily swears the island is real. She says it only appears to those who are foolish enough to go looking for it. To this day, she still finds small dolls outside her window every few months, handmade, tied together with shells and rope. She doesn't know who's leaving them. She just knows she'll never travel again. Let me know if you like these stories, and also suggest me new topic of your interest in the comments section.